okay, I've got a position to do a PhD, but how do I start? Where do I go? What do I need to focus on? If those are your questions, then this video is going to be probably the most useful video you will hopefully watch on this topic, because I'm going to go through my 10-step process. That's right, 10-step process on how you should start your PhD so you're efficient, effective, and streamlined in terms of getting the most out of your PhD. So grab your notes, grab your coffee, grab your drink, grab your food, dessert, popcorn, whatever it is that you want to grab, because stay tuned, this video is going to be probably one of the most useful videos I think I will make on the topic of tips and advice for the research life. So let's go with strategy number 1. Now, the first thing we need to understand and we need to implement in terms of a process when we start our PhD is how we think in terms of research. Now, there's the equation on the screen now, and what I call the research equation, because if you can have the lens of why and how in anything you read, anything you listen to, anything you watch, anything that you experience, you will have a better idea about the research understanding. So to put context into this, to give you an example, imagine you're reading a paper that your supervisor has given you. If you look at it on face value, you're like, okay, what's this? How? I don't understand this. Okay. There is no kind of structure to your thinking. There isn't that kind of a methodology to your thinking. And that's why this why and how comes in. I talk about a lot on my Instagram page. Here it is, Aamir.phd, if you aren't following. And it's a notion of, imagine you're reading that paper. Why did they come to this conclusion? Why did they focus on this and not that? Why didn't they do this? Why are they focusing on that particular context and not that one? Why did they do it in this way? Why are they looking at it from that point of view? You've got to think of all these questions. That's how you should think as a researcher. And then to add to that, you think of, okay, how did they perform it like this? How did they do it like this and then not that? How did they come to that conclusion when it looked like it could have been that? How did they not include this? How did they do their controls? How did they gather their participants? Why and how? Now you can sort of appreciate how important those two questions should be on your mind whenever you're doing anything in regards to research. So even when your supervisor is talking to you, why have they come to this conclusion? Why are they bringing this up in terms of, this research that way? So you start to have a bit more of structure as to how you should think as a researcher. So now, why plus how will help you in terms of research understanding, and that is the research mindset we need to slowly develop as soon as we start our PhD. Now, the second process is actually reducing friction from thought to capture. What that essentially means is that so many times we have ideas, or we find things, or we think of things, or we hear things, and we lose it all because either we haven't captured it all, and if we have captured it, it's not in a really organized fashion, and then we lose, or we don't know where to this strategy is all about the capture list. Now, many of us have phones, tablets, laptops, iMacs, any sort of digital device, but we also have a physical hard copy for those of you who might not want to focus completely on digital, which is perfectly fine. Find a strategy that has very little friction. So what I mean by that is, imagine I'm in the lab. I know I'm not, but imagine I'm in the lab and think of something. Is my laptop there and I can open up a app and quickly document something down and then not lose it? So something I use a lot is Apple Notes, because it's on my phone, it's on my iMac, it's on my my iPad, it's on my MacBook, and anywhere I am, I've got something to think I need to write down. I thought something, I've heard about something, I've read something, I found something. Within a matter of maybe 5 seconds or less, I can note it down, and then I definitely won't lose it because it's housed on my Apple list. And using the keyword search, I can just find angiogenesis or that topic or that thing, or look at the date where I found it. Sometimes what I normally do is when I write something down, I note down the date. So if I remember, it was on that day, and then I'm able to find it. This is going to be massive for you as a student when you're doing your research as a PhD student, because you will find all sorts of information from so many different avenues, and you need, for the most part, a quick way to capture it. Then we can focus on the whole notion of sorting it out, organizing it. Something I'm trying to understand with this book called The Second Brain. This video is not sponsored by Teogo Forte. He has no idea who I am, sorry. But I'm starting to really understand and really value his content. So he's talking about this whole notion of a second brain. Now, part of this kind of video is linked to you setting up a system, which I'll be talking about later on. But this point of capture list is really, really important for you not to lose valuable insights and information that you might find through various sources: video, PDFs, articles, people talking. Capture list minimize friction, and within 5 seconds you should be able to note down what you found without any issues. Now, looking at the third strategy, again, is actually linking back to what we talked about in terms of a capture list, is that's for quick thought capture. But this strategy now is looking at long-term forms of organization and capture in the sense of continuous documents. Don't know what fancy kind of name there is for it, but it's what I call it. And it's this notion of throughout your PhD, you will, especially at first, when you first start your PhD, there'll be new vocabularies. There'll be new kind of sentences and phrases that you find in papers that are actually really good. They give a perfect way of explaining or describing that data that you will probably do towards the end of your PhD. And it's really good to capture that. But then there's also actual summaries of papers, all the papers that you read. You want one centralized platform or document where you have summaries of these papers. And then lastly, the different types of techniques and form of analyses that you might do, we have to learn how to do that. So if you've got a central document where you can go back and one, find resources related to certain techniques, but also when you finish X, Y, and Z for some time and you come back to it 2 years later, you want a quick way to figure out how did you do that before in case you've forgotten. So there's 4 continuous documents I just referred to. I'll put them on the screen now. One is actual vocabulary. A lot of the times when you're doing your PhD and you start out, that field is new to you. Even though you might have some relevance or some experience in it, a lot of it is actually quite new to you. The terminologies, the different, code names that are used in that field might be a bit alien to you. So you want kind of your own personalized research glossary, essentially. And that's why we look at the first continuous document. Then related to that, you want to look at actual sentences and phrases that you find in papers that help you to set the scene or describe data. And that's actually really important because you might be thinking about something, but it's hard to articulate. And when you get to your thesis, imagine you have a whole document dedicated to how to describe various parts of data, talking about various parts of your data, or your field, or your work, that you can actually refer to for inspiration. That's the second continuous document. The other one is actually then looking at the bulk of the paper, the content of the paper, and trying to summarize it in kind of like 3 bullet points. So then you can find the paper title, the date, the author, and then you can just search for it in that document, whichever format and platform you want to use. But it's the notion of having a continuous document that you can slowly add things in over time, and you can easily find and refer to. So summaries of articles and papers in 3 bullet points is the third continuous document. And then lastly is, depending on the type of your research, whether you're in the lab, whether you're out in the field, whether you're computational based, you have techniques or forms of analyses, kind of like your how-to with your data that we have to learn. And when we have to learn, we have to remember how we did it, and also we need to talk about it when we write papers and write our thesis. So we can have a nice document where we understood everything, the resources have how we understood that, practical examples, essentially our protocols, right, that we make in one document. It'll be easy to refer to, and it'll be easy then to teach others when you have students in your research group. That's the 4th continuous document. Believe me, when you get towards the end of your PhD, you'll be thankful you started these documents when you started your PhD. I guarantee you, definitely. Now, the 4th strategy is incredibly important for entire your life, really. But if you were to start your PhD, I think it's even more important. And that is the notion of having an active calendar that you master. Very important. Now, the reason why is that many people ask me for advice on how do you time manage, how do you product manage in your PhD when you did yours. The biggest thing I try to do, that I do try to do more now, is I time block things I need to do in advance. Now, that's not to do with just work, that's to do with things that I need to get done even outside of my PhD or outside of research. So whether it's sports, whether it's I need to meet people, whether it's I need to sort this out. And then I can plan all my experiments around that to make sure I'm also looking after myself as well as being efficient and effective in my PhD. So whichever calendar you want to use, whether it's Google, Apple, an app, all sorts of calendars, that's not the point. The point is that you have something that you master, you find easy to use, that you constantly look at and block in time. So if it's supervisor meeting, if there are experiments, time for analysis, time for reading, time for yourself, which should be there first, and then you plan your PhD and stuff around it. And that's the biggest part of this strategy, is put stuff that you need to do for yourself, for your mental health, for your health and well-being, and then you plan your research and stuff around it. Because that's the beauty of the flexibility of a PhD. So why not lean into it? Master your calendar. Really important. Now, the 5th strategy is something I wish I did really early on in my PhD that I only did probably in the final year, which I regret. And that is the notion of identify people of interest and identify theses. Now, what I mean by this is that, especially with the thesis part, we'll start with that. Theses are gold mines for you in terms of structure of a thesis, the content, the actual data, how they presented it, how they discussed it, the flow, and that'll be really useful inspiration and a good template for you when you're writing your thesis. So what I used to do is that I used to compile theses that were really good in the different areas I needed it to be, and I had, I think, about 4 or 5 theses in the end that I used to refer back to when I'm looking at certain chapters in my thesis. And that really accelerated my ability to write my thesis and structure it because I had really good inspirations. A lot of the research that you're doing isn't going to be super novel in the sense of nobody has ever thought about it before. There is some relevance because you might have been looking at it from other people's papers, and those papers might be related to other people's theses. Now, they might be confidential, they might be under patents, but there are actually a lot of theses online that you can search and able to find in terms of relations to your work. So you can get an idea of, okay, how should I structure my work? Where should my methods go? Where should I put this? Where should I put that? How should I structure the chapter inside? That comes from the notion of theses, and amazing papers and methods come from theses as well, not just papers. So really, really dig in. You might find it from your own research group, that previous PhD students before you, that you can learn from. Some supervisors actually use that as a starting point, and then you develop forward. So if you're not using that, make sure you get down and look at theses related to your work. Get it early on and start to dissect it, read it, absorb it, because you're going to gain a lot from it. And the other bit is the notion of identify experts. Those might be those PhD students, those might be people you find on social media, people you find in commonalities and research papers you've seen online. Find who they are, keep updated on what they're doing, because you'll find really important research information quickly if you are following these and if you are following these people, and if you are actually keeping an eye on what they're doing. Contact them, say, look, I'm interested, I'm doing this research area, love to come visit the lab. You learn from these people, you learn from their research groups. So find out who they are, because then you'll get more known related to your research, because you're making an effort to learn or find these experts and build a rapport, a dialogue with them. And you might want to get their insights that your supervisor would welcome. So make sure you identify theses and experts in your field. Now, this strategy is more of a importance in terms of your self-care, your health and well-being, and make sure you're looking after yourself. And that is the notion of having a key contact list. Now, what I mean by this is that you have key contact lists in case of emergencies, which is quite common, which you'll be advised for. But you also have key contact lists that make it easier for you to identify things quicker, so you're not worried or stressed, and it makes it easier to find relevant personnel for what you need it for. So, for example, make sure you have your university security number, your technician's contact details, because sometimes your phone might die, your laptop might die, and you need to contact somebody because you might be stuck in the lab, or you might be concerned about something and you're not actually in the university and you don't know what the email address is. Now, you could essentially find it online, but what if you don't have an internet connection at the time, and what if you don't know where to look? Imagine you just had a page document that had all the relevant information, whether it's email addresses, whether phone numbers, if you are allowed to have their phone numbers, or their office numbers, and have that central key contact list. So if you need to speak to anybody related to your PhD for all number of reasons, you can just refer to that page, and then you can send an email or text message. You don't have to go and find their numbers, and sometimes that can be half the battle. You might get stressed. I don't know who to contact. I don't know who to find. Get that done early and start your PhD, so you don't have to worry about it later on. Now, this is really important, really simple. It might be slightly pedantic, but believe me, the amount of people who don't do this and then actually get shot in the foot because they've lost their data is profound. And that is the notion of cloud storage. Any data you gather, any writing, any bits of your PhD, you don't want to lose it. Imagine how scared we get when our data is on the memory stick and we're trying to back it up. Make sure, one, you back it up quickly, but back it up in a cloud storage manner that's secure, so you can never lose it. Hard drives can sometimes get damaged. Pen drives and USBs, SSDs can sometimes get damaged. Your MacBook, your laptop, I'm Apple, your laptop can get damaged. But a cloud storage, as long as you have an internet connection, and even if you don't, you can access it anywhere, so you're less likely to have problems with it. So have a periodic, window every week or every other day. If you're on your computer a lot, back up your data. When you have your experiments, have a routine where you back it up locally, you back it up on something else, and you back it up on the cloud, so you don't actually lose it. It's really, really important, because It sounds like those extra 5 minutes will help, because imagine you have to repeat something because you've lost it or you didn't label it properly. That's incredibly important. So make sure you have a cloud storage kind of backup to your entire PhD workflow. Now, this strategy you might think holds only a little bit of importance or holds not much value, but I argue probably the biggest regret I have when I did my PhD, and that is the notion of having hobbies that you actually ingrain in your kind of weekly life. Now, you heard me talk about the notion of mastering a calendar, and I said back then about make sure you put stuff that is related for you, for yourself, health and well-being, for your own self-value and self-worth, and the whole notion of you looking after yourself is actually having hobbies. Now, you may have hobbies going into your PhD already, but even if you don't, learn new hobbies, find new hobbies, explore. You're not in prison. A PhD is something you're supposed to enjoy. It is hard work. It's supposed to be hard, but it doesn't mean you don't have a life afterwards. So within your university that you're in, or institute, or in the country that you're in the city that you're in, there might be new things you want to explore, new things you want to try out. Make sure that one, you try them, but two, you make time for them in your calendar. So that might be sports, so that might be watching a TV show, that might be meeting with friends, that might be doing something more practical. Whatever it is, find a new hobby and do it with people. You don't have to, but you can do it on your own. But if you find people, it might be clubs, it might be activities, it might be, evening classes in something that you really like, or you might be like courses online that you want to learn how to do. Like, for example, for me, it's making videos, which I really enjoy. It's a hobby of mine. So find a hobby that you can use as an outlet away from your PhD. Whatever you like and enjoy, that would be good. It's not, for example, too expensive, it's not too cumbersome as a hobby, not a strenuous task. Find it, because I think it will benefit you, as I know it would have for me had I made time for it. Again, like I said, biggest regret, unfortunately, I had. Now, second last strategy that you definitely need to cultivate and grow is the value of company around you. We used to think when I was doing my PhD and all of us were going through so much problems, we used to think about, we're in the trenches, this is kind of like war. And it sounds really, over dramatic, but that's how it felt at times. Because we were at war with the data, with the experiments, at war with the supervisors sometimes because we had tight deadlines and we were working so long. So having what they call it, brothers in arms, in terms of fellow comrades, it sounds really cliche or over dramatic, but the company that you develop in your PhD is amazing and will help you through those really difficult times far more than what you probably have in your undergraduate or your masters, because PhD can be that difficult. So if you've got people in your research group, just make time for them, make time to cultivate. But you also have company outside of your PhD. You might be in your accommodation, or you might be in the area that you're living, or you might be certain clubs that you go to in terms of sports or activities that you build friends there. Whatever the scenario is, or however you make friends within research, outside research, make sure you have company that you can lean on a weekly basis, or you can have a chat with, or go to lunch with, etc. You have your own time, your me time, of course, but make sure you have time that you allocate to people, because it will help you in the good times when an experiment's gone well. You've got somebody to celebrate with. But when things go down, you've got somebody you can lean on and who you can talk it out with and feel better. Again, something I really closed off, which I regret in my PhD when I did mine, that I had great friends, again, life goes on and everyone has either families or other things to do. But during those times, those people were incredibly important to me, and I wish I had more of them in the early part of my PhD. Thankfully, towards the end, I did. But if you can make great company early on, it'll help you throughout the rest of your PhD. Now, lastly, this is a really, really important strategy that I use now for life in general, and that's the notion of visualize the end goal. Now, what I did in my PhD, especially I think towards midway through my first year, believe it or not, is I actually wrote the cover page of my thesis. Now, I'll put it on here so you can see. There was no data yet, there's nothing, but just seeing that inspired me to keep going, to say, look, that's going to be the front page of my thesis when I get there. And I kept looking at it every day. I kept, I put in the university logo, my name, when I'll finish my PhD. And it gave me that buzz, that boost, that, do you know what, that's what I'm working towards, that's what I'm going to get. And it made life so much more, worthwhile and meaningful, because I could visualize the end goal of where I was. And thankfully, long and behold, I got there in the end. I have the thesis that I look at quite often in terms of just, I did it. and visualizing just that cover page. And that's what I recommend many PhD students to do, is that maybe towards while you get to your first year, many of you have to do kind of like a transfer or a PhD acceptance exam. After that, write that cover page, stick it on your office wall or even at home. It'll help you to visualize that end goal. That's what you're working towards, right? Because you can fill in everything else before that cover page. So that's something that really benefited me. It made me happy to see, and it inspired me, motivated me more. So that's something I would encourage you, whichever way you want to visualize your end goal. It might be, drafting an email of what you would reply to when you've got that, PhD confirmation. That might be a visualization. That cover page was a visual one for me, but whichever way you want to look at it, go for it. But have some sort of visualization, because it was profound for me and something I do now for life in general. And I think I would encourage all of you to do the same. So guys, that was a slightly longer video, but I believe it's packed with super important and actionable advice that I want you all to go away and implement if you are starting a PhD. And even if you are a year on, I do feel a lot of these advices will be really beneficial for you to make sure you do it sooner rather than later. Because the video is so long, if you all want to follow Aamir.phd here for Instagram, my email is in the video description down below if you want to sign up to the newsletter. And do subscribe and like the video if you can. It will help the channel, it will help me, it will help me to grow and help more and more researchers like yourself around the world. I'll tune out, and I shall catch you in the next one. Take care.